ඒකයි මම බය නැතුව Nokia Android smartphone එක ඕන කෙනෙකුට ගන්න කියන්නේ.
සමගා අලුත් වන Nokia.
Madam President, Madam High Commissioner, members of the Human Rights Commission and the delegates to the 43rd session of the HRC, ladies and gentlemen, as this Council deliberates on the written update presented by the High Commissioner on progress regarding the implementation of the HRC Resolution 30/1, I wish to reiterate that Sri Lanka remains committed to engaging with the High Commissioner and her office in achieving sustainable development, peace and reconciliation within the national framework overwhelmingly approved by the people of Sri Lanka during the presidential election last November, where President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected with an overwhelming majority. Yesterday, the government of Sri Lanka at the high-level segment made it clear its position with regard to the HRC Resolution 30/1, particularly its decision to withdraw from the co-sponsorship of the Resolution 40/1 of March 2019. Notwithstanding withdrawing from the co-sponsorship of the resolution, we emphasize that our commitment to achieving the goals set by the people of Sri Lanka on accountability, human rights, towards sustainable peace and reconciliation through the appointment of a domestic commission of inquiry, by implementing policies rooted in the government's commitment to operationalize the sustainable development goals, by continuing to work with the assistance of the UN and its agencies. To those who have expressed disappointment on Sri Lanka's decision to withdraw from the co-sponsorship of the Resolution 30/1, despite the government's reassurance to this Council of our commitment to achieving the goals within the framework of our Constitution to ensure accountability and human rights towards sustainable peace and reconciliation. It is clear that they are privileging a superficial facade which has failed to deliver for 4.5 years over the genuine possibility of reconciliation, underpinned by people's mandate. In keeping with our consistent policy of continued engagement with the Human Rights Council, Sri Lanka wishes to respond to the current report of the High Commissioner and engage in a constructive discussion with the August Assembly today, with the sincere hope that this Council would recognize their realities on the ground. We do so conscious of the fact that period of 1 year since the adoption of the Resolution 40/1 and 4.5 years since the adoption of the initial Resolution 30/1, our government has been in power for only a little over 100 days out of the said period. I wish to recall that during the 40th session of the Council, almost a year ago, the government of Sri Lanka was represented by a delegation headed by my predecessor, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, who in Sri Lanka's statement explained at length the constitutional, legal and the socio-political challenges involved in full implementing the HRC Resolution of 30/1. In this context, we consider that the High Commissioner's insistence on the current report on the full implementation of the demands made on Sri Lanka in Resolution 31 indicates that the OHR fails to recognize the rational, legitimate concerns voiced by the states that are seeking in good faith to address issues. As highlighted before the Council on several occasions, Sri Lanka has consistently refuted the credibility of the false and unsubstantiated allegations leveled against Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, the present commander of the Sri Lanka Army, Sri Lanka considers that the continued arbitrary accusations made against Lieutenant General Silva in the OHCHR reports and other statements made in this council and unilateral actions by certain countries are unacceptable and a violation of the principles of natural justice. We also state that there are no proven allegations against individuals on war crimes or crimes against humanity in the OISL report or in any subsequent official document. It is an injustice to deprive any serving or retired officer of the Sri Lankan security forces or the police of their due rights. With regard to alleged intimidating visits, surveillance, complaints of harassment and reprisals referred to in the High Commissioner's report, the government has already publicly refuted these allegations and is committed to protecting and promoting freedom of expression and civil society space and ensure that complaints received on alleged attacks against journalists, human rights defenders and civil society are investigated and prosecuted. With respect to the reference in the report to the 13th Amendment to the Constitution that established provincial councils, it must be noted that in 2013, soon after ending the armed conflict, the citizens in the northern province were able to use their franchise at a provincial council election after a lapse of 25 years. However, near 2-year delay in holding provincial council elections in any part of the country by the previous government, which co-sponsored Resolution 30/1 with the active supported members of Parliament representing the north and the east of Sri Lanka, has hampered the operationalization of devolution of power as mandated by the Constitution of Sri Lanka. The new government is committed to holding the provincial council elections at the earliest possible opportunity as the failed amendment is suitably amended appropriately. We wish to reiterate to the Council Sri Lanka's commitment expressed during the high-level segment to achieve sustainable peace through an inclusive domestic design and executed reconciliation and accountability process. The existing reconciliation mechanisms established by an Act of Parliament, such as the Office on the Missing Persons and the Office of Reparations, will be continued with the appropriate adoption in line with the government's policy framework. With regard to the issues on missing persons, steps would be taken after necessary investigations to issue death certificates or certificates of absence, while also providing livelihood and assistance to the affected families. A commission of inquiry headed by a justice of the Supreme Court will be appointed to review the reports of the previous Sri Lanka commissions of inquiries which investigated alleged violations of human rights and international humanitarian law to assess the status of implementation of their recommendations and to propose deliverable measures to implement them in keeping in line with the new government's policy. The national law enforcement system will continue to investigate and prosecute cases on allegations of torture and other human rights violations that are currently before the judicial process. We hope the Council would appreciate this approach of focusing on deliverable measures of reconciliation that are in line with the interests of Sri Lanka and its people, instead of the practice of taking on a host of undeliverable commitments with the intention of never implementing them. Within the above parameters, we look forward to continuing our engagement with the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN human rights mechanisms and procedures, and continue to work in close cooperation with the international community through the capacity building and technical assistance in mutually agreed areas in keeping with the domestic priorities and policies. I will be tabling the full text of my speech. I thank you.
මගේ විශ්වාසය මැක්සිස්